Welcome everyone, my name is Donella and I'm a member of the Development and Alumni Relations Office at the University of Otago, and it's a very great pleasure to be able to host you all this afternoon at this inaugural event that we've used the Hocken Collections to provide a webinar for you all. Now, some of you will already be familiar with the Hocken Collections and understand that they have a range of materials available for public viewing. And today we're going to focus on materials from the 1940s through to the 1980s and hope that this might provide a nostalgic journey for you. Today, I'm very happy to welcome, and I'd like to welcome and thank our two presenters, both of whom are librarians at the Hocken Collections. And I'm sure that their expertise and their passion for their subject area will ensure that there is a fascinating presentation for you today. So I'd love to welcome today Amanda Mills, who's been a liaison librarian and curator music and AV at the Hocken Collection since December 2011. She has worked with music and sound collections since 2004 and has researched different areas of music for academic and general publication, as well as writing for New Zealand Musician Magazine and Audio Culture, the Noisy Library of New Zealand Music. Amanda is currently working towards a Master of Arts in Music. Our second presenter today is Katherine Milburn, who was appointed Liaison Librarian and Curator of Ephemera at the Hocken Collections in November 2011. A graduate in Anthropology at the University of Otago and in Library and Information Studies at Victoria University of Wellington. She has worked at the Hocken Collection since 1989. She enjoys helping all kinds of researchers find and use Hocken material. Now, you'll also notice at the bottom of your screen there is a Q&A button. If you have any questions for Amanda and Katherine, please feel free to type them into the Q&A area, and at the end of the presentation, we will address those questions and ask them to answer them. If we run out of time, we will answer those questions via email. But once again, it's my very great pleasure to welcome you all here this afternoon, and I'd like to thank both Amanda and Katherine for their time, and I will now hand over to both Amanda and Katherine to take you through their journey of the Hocken Collections. Thank you.
Kia ora everyone.
Good afternoon.
We're just going to share our screen, so we've got a PowerPoint presentation for you to look at.
I hope everyone can see that. Well, kia ora, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. It's lovely to know that you are out there watching our presentation. I'm Amanda Mills. I'm a liaison librarian here, and we're going to take you through a PowerPoint tour, virtual tour of the Hocken over the next 45 minutes. So if you don't know much about the Hocken, we're going to tell you a wee bit first. The Hocken is open from Monday to Saturday, 10 AM to 5 PM. But our pictures and photographs collections are open by appointment only at the moment. So the Hocken is named after Dr. Thomas Morland Hocken. He was born in England in 1836 and trained as a medical doctor. He immigrated to Dunedin in the early 1860s and set up a general practice in Warre Place, right across the road from First Church, and I'm sure some of you are familiar with that area. On the right, you can see his house, Atahapara. He also became the coroner in Dunedin, which involves determining the cause of death of people who die suddenly or in suspicious circumstances. Dr. Hocken began collecting all types of material when he arrived here, and he wanted to document the history and development of New Zealand. He also used this material for his own research and compiled the first major bibliography of New Zealand literature. He travelled around the country collecting all kinds of printed material as well as art and artefacts. He decided to gift his collection to the people of New Zealand to be managed by the University of Otago. So the Hocken is both a public library that is open to everyone and also part of the University of Otago library system. So the Hocken first opened in 1910 in a wing of the Otago Museum. And if you go down the one-way system going north, you'll still see the Hocken wing on the side of the building. Once material is accepted into our collections, we keep it forever. So our need for physical space to keep this material is always increasing, as you can imagine. The library moved into most of one tower of what was called the Hocken building in 1979, excuse me, and that's the building in the middle of the screen. And that building is now called the Richardson building. In 1989, the archives and photograph sections moved into separate buildings on Leith Street, which is done by the university. And in 1998, both sections of the library came together again in our current building on Anzac Avenue, which was formerly a cheese and butter factory. It was the Otago Cooperative Dairy Factory. So we specialise in material from New Zealand, particularly Otago and Southland, and we also collect material from the Pacific, Antarctica and early Australia. And we have continued to collect following the original collecting by Dr. Hocken. And this includes any material relating to New Zealand or by a New Zealander, and again focusing on Otago and Southland. So the Hocken is a research library and collects a wide range of material to a greater depth in a range of subject areas. It is reference only, so items can only be used within the library, and the Hocken is also closed stack, so it is only on our library tours that you can see into the stacks where we keep our materials. Now, usually you can search the public catalogues to locate items and request them once you are registered, and then staff retrieve them for you to use in our reading rooms. You can scan or photograph material, but with no flash, for your own private research, unless, of course, there are restrictions in place. We do ask that you comply with copyright, though, and we can also supply physical copying, but there is a small charge. So to use the Hocken, you must register as a reader. If you are a staff member or student of the University of Otago or Otago Polytechnic, then you've got an ID card, which means that you are registered to use our published collections. And that's books, newspapers, magazines, maps, and audiovisual material. You can do this by logging onto the University of Otago library catalogue. It's called Library Search Ketu, with your institution's username and password. Now, if you wish to use our unpublished collections, which are archives and manuscripts, photographs, pictures, and ephemera, then you need to register to use Hakana, which is our unpublished collections database. Any member of the public can register to use any of the collections, and desk staff can provide you with registration form to fill out, but we do need to cite some photo ID. So if you could just please bring in a driver's license, passport, or something that has your photograph on it, that would be most helpful. So because we hold unique heritage material and we wish to keep it for as long as possible, we do ask that people please place any bags and laptop sleeves in our lockers. Each locker can be locked with a key, and you keep hold of that while you're in the library, so everything is safe. You are able to bring in items like laptops and writing material, but we do ask that pencils are used in the reading room only, and we do provide these as well. Also, if you have one, we suggest you bring in your university or Polytech ID cards, and of course your Hocken card. We can't eat or drink in the reading room, but you are most welcome to make use of our lunchroom in the foyer. There is a fridge and an oven and a microwave oven for use, and there's tea, coffee and Milo, and of course water available as well. Now, these supplies are paid for through donation, and there is a donation box on the wall in the tea room. So just a wee overview of the published collections and the unpublished material that we have. So in our published collections, there are a wide range of books, both fiction and non-fiction. And here you can see some of our items, for example, a first edition of the Edmonds Cookbook. We also hold a wide variety of past and current newspapers, from the very first newspaper published in Dunedin, the Otago News, in 1848, through to newspapers published in the Pacific Islands. We only hold the major daily newspapers for Auckland and Wellington in the North Island, but we do hold a wide range of newspapers published in the South Island for smaller towns and cities, as well as the bigger centres. We also hold a large number of New Zealand, Pacific and Antarctic related magazines and newsletters. These range from mainstream magazines like the New Zealand Women's Day to academic journals such as Pacific Science. We have a very large map collection that includes things like early discovery maps through to modern tourist maps. The collection includes a wide range of map types, such as charts that show how deep the harbours are, atlases, topographical maps that show features of the landscape, and cadastral maps, such as the one seen here for Waverley, which is a suburb in Dunedin. These show how the land has been split into sections and blocks of ownership, and our collection also includes a series of aerial photographs of Dunedin from the late 1940s. I'm always proud of these collections because these are the ones that I develop and take care of. So we collect all formats of recorded music and sound recordings by New Zealand artists or produced in New Zealand. These include over 19,000 recordings on record, and that includes LPs, 45s, and 78 RPM discs. There's also cassette tapes and compact discs. We even have a cylinder or two. Alongside these collections, we hold over 3,500 pieces of sheet music, and the oldest on the right is The Whalers of the Deep Sea by De Huhu and St George from around 1857. We are also starting to collect digital downloads, but these are currently not available to listen to as yet. Our music collections represent all genres, from classical music and opera to punk, country and western, rock and popular music. Our collection is particularly strong in Dunedin music, especially that of the Dunedin sound. Our sound recordings also include New Zealand myths and stories in both English and te reo, as well as recordings of New Zealand literature and sports commentary. And getting a bit ahead of ourselves here. I also collect the audiovisual materials. So our audiovisual collections include a wide range of formats on VHS video and DVD, as well as Blu-ray disc. A range of genres are also covered from documentaries such as YMI, which is a Dunedin study, feature films, for example, Scarface from 1996, which is a film about Otago University students and their antics, and Moana, a children's film featuring which features a Polynesian story, as well as myths, and the film includes New Zealand actors as well. And we also have the English and te reo version of that film. We also collect television series, so you might be familiar with West Side, which is a historical drama and a outrageous fortune. So all material must be played on the equipment in our audiovisual area. And these can be set up so that 4 people at once can view or listen at any one time. We do ask if you did come in and wanted to watch something on video or listen to something on cassette, that you order it 24 hours before you come in, just because of the way it's stored. It needs to acclimatise to room temperature.
Okay, so it's Katherine now, and I look after the Ephemera Collection. Ephemera is a Greek word that means something that lasts for a day. So in terms of what we hold here, it is the type of material that most people would use and then dispose of, but we want to collect that kind of material because it's direct evidence of what our society was like at a particular time. So it tells you about the types of technology that we had available, fashions in clothing, design, and it's just actually some and not a lot of other libraries collect it, and so that's why it is important to collect. And on the screen there you can see examples of the types of flyers we have. So as you probably are well aware, it's election time, and we've been collecting election material for the whole country since 1966. We also have a whole range of programs. It does include major sporting events, but also all kinds of music and theatre programs. We do just basically collect these for Otago and a little bit of Southland, but some things we do collect nationally. So the election ephemera as well as tourism ephemera we do collect for the whole country. We also, the collection includes packaging for local firms. So here you can see a German sausages label for a local company, Irvine and Stevenson. They used to be located in Dunedin, and they made jam as well as obviously tinned meats. And what's interesting is this is probably pre-World War I, because anything that had the name German in it would have changed to Belgian because of the negative connotations with the war. On the left here, a lot of you will be familiar with this. So these are golden Kiwi tickets, what we used to have pre-lotto, and we get groups of high school students coming in, and they're always interested to see that the first prize back then was $24,000. Which wouldn't even get you a deposit on a house these days, but back then that probably paid for a house and a whole lot more. And on the far right here, we've got an NAC airline ticket, and again, it shows you the changes in our society, because these days you can turn up, you don't even have to have a physical ticket, you can just scan something, QR code from your phone, you don't have to have that physical ticket. So again, evidence of how society changes over time. And the Ephemera Collection also includes posters, and there's over 23,000 posters at the Hocken. These range in subject. We've got a very strong collection of health and safety posters, and here you can see some quite important messages that are still of concern today. And in the middle there, another election poster. This one's from the 1970s. It's for the Labour Party, but you can see that they're trying to hark back to the times when women first got the vote. And on the right here, this is not a poster, but it's more like a menu of services available at Hendy's toilet rooms, and toilet room was actually an old name for ladies' hairdressers. So you can see the types of service that were available and the prices they charged. The problem with a lot of ephemera is it doesn't have dates, but through research with old telephone books that we have in the library, and actually just working out that Marcel waving was a form of curling your hair that was very popular in the 1920s and 30s. This is probably the date of this actual item here. So we have a very, very large archives and manuscripts collection at the library. Archives are the records of an organisation, and our records include a whole lot of organisations like local churches. We have, we're the official repository for the Anglican churches in Otago. We also include a whole lot of local schools and businesses, and of course the University, College of Education, a whole lot of sporting and community organisations, places like the Otago Rugby Football Union, Plunket Society started in Dunedin, so we've got all their records there. Manuscripts are the personal papers of individuals, so it can include things like diaries, and on the top right of the screen here you can see a journal by William Fox, who was an early surveyor. He travelled out to New Zealand in the 1840s, and his journal of his voyage out to New Zealand includes some fabulous little sketches, including the one on the screen which shows a dog. And we also have the papers of Lady Anna Stout. She was married to Robert Stout, who was a prominent Dunedin lawyer and then became the Premier of New Zealand. She was an early suffragist and was involved in the British suffragist movement, and she collected suffragette badges from all around the world. So they're also the type of material we have in the library. So there are over 1 million photographs in the archives collection, because if people donate us their photographs along with their letters and diaries and things, we keep them together in the archives collection. But we've also got over 1 million photographs separately in our photographs collection. And again, these cover all kinds of topics and people and all kinds of subjects, and they include photographs from amateur photographers as well as professional photographer studios. So on the top left there you can see a portrait of Shona McFarlane by Maurice Kershaw. You may remember Shona McFarlane. She was a panellist on the TV show in the 1970s, Beauty and Beast, and she was also quite a well-known artist. And on the top right is a photograph of the Octagon in the 1870s with a big monument there that's not there anymore. Below that is a photograph from the 1960s of the Balaclava Midgets marching team, which is in colour, so people can see the lurid colours that were used for fashion in the 1960s. And on the left there, Dunedin Airport with an NAC aeroplane. So that ticket that we saw previously would have been what you used to board the plane. We also have a very large pictures collection, so over 17,000 works of art, and if you compare that, for example, to the holdings of the Dunedin Public Art Gallery, they've got 13,000, so it is a significant collection. And it includes very early works of art, so on the bottom we have a work by J.C. Hoyt of showing the pink and white terraces, which disappeared in the Tarawera eruption. So Dr. Hocken was collecting works of art like this because they showed what the country looked like. And when he first came to New Zealand, photography was just being started. So this was a way of documenting what our country looked like and the changes. And he also collected portraits of people who were prominent in history. But over time, our focus of collecting has changed. So we are documenting the history and development of New Zealand art itself. So we are not only collecting historic artists, but current artists as well. So on the top left, there is a work by Doris Lusk, which shows tobacco fields in Nelson. And on the right is a work by W.H. Allen, which shows a baby called David, who was 7 months old in September 1973. So the Hocken has its own website. It's actually within the main University of Otago Library website, but if you just typed in the word Hocken into Google, it will bring up our website, and you can see in this blue banner on the left, there's a whole lot of links where you can find further information as well as staff contacts if you wanted to email us in particular, or find other curators to, if you've got a specific inquiry, maybe that relates to the map collection, it would make more sense to contact Karen Craw, our map librarian. And in this middle there's also some links there that you can take, as well as links to our social media accounts, which we'll talk about later. So one of the links on the blue banner is to our research guides. We've got over 40 of these. These are all free and available to download from our webpage. We do update these every year, but if you are able to come into the library, then you can pick up paper copies, and again, they're free. So we do have a set of genealogical sources guides. So if you're interested in genealogical research and you wanted to know about specific resources that are held at the Hocken, they describe what we have. And then our main reference guides are split up into sort of subject areas. So there are ones covering all the major wars like World War I, South African War, World War II. We have a lot of people coming to do research on houses and buildings. So there's a guide relating to that. If you're interested in agriculture, Antarctic, science, health sciences, law, there's guides relating to those. And on the right there, we also have a series of Māori research guides. So there's one specifically on kaitahu sources, but also how to do whakapapa research. Now, both our catalogues are available online, so you are able to search them from anywhere without having to be registered as a library user. But if you do ever want to come in and use the collections, as Amanda said before, you do have to register as a reader. So we are gradually digitising material and making it sometimes available through these catalogues. This particular catalogue here is what you would use to search for our published collections, so our books, newspapers, magazines, maps and audiovisual material, but you do have to be aware that it also includes the holdings of the main university library system. But when you find something, you just need to check that it's got a Hocken holding to be aware. Hakana is the name of our other catalogue, so that's where you look for any other kind of material. So that's pictures, photographs, archives and manuscripts, and we've just started adding ephemera. So there's not a lot on there at the moment, ephemera-wise. So if you can't find anything on our catalogues, it does always pay to ask staff, because not everything is actually listed on the catalogues, or it may be the way that you're searching. So staff are always willing to help you find material yourself. We also have a separate website called Hocken Snapshop, where we have made available digitised photographs. There's about 30,000 photographs. So as I said earlier, there's 2 million photographs in the library altogether. So this is a very small portion, and we are not adding to this particular website, but there are images you can search. You can search under a particular term, or you can browse using the subjects on the right on the screen, and you are able to download low-res images there. And we have another website called Our Heritage, where you are able to find some digitised paintings, a few pieces of ephemera, sheet music from World War I, as well as some of our archives collection too. And as I said before, we do have a social media presence. So we do have our own Facebook page, Twitter account, a Hocken blog page and a YouTube channel. So if any of you are exploring the web, then please feel free to log on to any of those and locate our materials. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we've selected a few items that you might find of interest, and so we're just going to run through those. So as this is an alumni event, we thought that you would be interested in some things relating to the university from days gone by, and we do have a fantastic collection of photographs that are available to view through our catalogue Harkener that were taken in 1949 by a photographer in the Prime Minister's Department. So as you can see, they're very good quality photographs. And this one shows a chat between lectures at the University of Otago quadrangle, and obviously students back then were a lot better dressed than they are now, and they've even got nice little leather briefcases too. And another photograph in that series shows the interior of St Margaret's College Common Room, obviously a women's college, and again another fascinating glimpse into the life of students back in 1949.
So there's a wide range of University of Otago related material in the collections, and that includes periodicals. And on the right, you'll see the Otago University capping book. So capping is a huge part of university culture, and we've documented it in different collections. Here you see a recording on the left of the 1960 capping concert, and as I said, the 1948 capping book. We also have photographs, publications, archives, and other documents, and some other AV recordings from the 1980s of capping events.
So on the left here, you can see it's not really a poster, it's kind of a card that was used to promote a 1958 production by the Otago University Dramatic Society, and this scan here doesn't really show it in its full glory because the painting, the coloured lettering is actually kind of a lot brighter and almost fluoro in appearance. And it's just an example of the type of material we have relating to a whole lot of clubs and societies of the university. And on the right here you can see a photograph of from the University Cricket Club Senior 11 in 1968 and 69, and this material is in our archives collection. So again, we have records for a whole lot of different clubs, but we also have gaps. So if any of you have your own records that you'd like to donate to the library, we'd be most interested in that kind of material, so just feel free to contact us about that. And then in our art collection, we also have some beautiful drawings, architectural drawings. This is one by Edmund Anscombe, who was an architect, and he obviously designed this archway building, which features Allen Hall on the right there, and behind it was Marama Hall. And obviously it's not a literal depiction there, because as you may all remember, this building's actually on a slope, so this is showing it flat.
So on our YouTube channel, there's about 50 short videos, and you can find it on YouTube if you go to the website and just type in Hocken Collections in the search box, and it will bring up that channel. So this film is VJ Day celebrations in Dunedin on the 15th of August 1945, marking the end of World War II. And the film is from the collection of Dunedin amateur filmmaker William Hood Davidson, who passed away in 1979. And we have to thank Maurice Hayward for digitising this film, and Maurice is part of the Cine Club in Dunedin, and he does amazing stuff digitising local film for us and for other institutions as well. And this is footage shot around Queenstown and Lake Wakatipu in 1951 or 1952. So the film shows the steamers, the Ben Lomond and the Earnslaw, also Queenstown Gardens, streets and buildings, bowling and views from a motorboat, iCards Hotel and the Karawau Falls Dam. And it's digitised from 8mm film and the George Thorne collection. And again, thank you to Maurice Hayward, who did such a wonderful job of digitising material.
So in the Ephemera Collection, we've got all kinds of advertising for local firms and companies. And on the left here, you can see a fabulous advertisement for stockings, and again, no date, possibly 1950s, I would say, from the dress that she's wearing. It was a local department store, Arthur Barnett, some of you may recall that, which it's now been changed to H&J Smith, and again about to change again because that firm is closing the Dunedin store. And on the right there, we've got a fabulous advertisement for 1960s Triumph Herald, and this is from a brochure, and someone has helpfully handwritten the price at that time of £895. A bargain. And then this is a great sheet of little coloured advertising cards that was part of a competition called the Whopper Swapper. So each of these sheets was delivered to households in Dunedin, and the aim was that people would cut up each square. They would decide they would only collect one or two of them, and then you would swap them with other people who were obviously collecting other ones, and then you would submit how many cards you had collected to the competition runners, and you can see there was quite a great prize of £150 for the open section, and for children it was a lesser prize of £25. But what's great for researchers today is that some of these firms are still going, but it also shows fashions and actually also the longevity of brands. So you've got Tiger Tea there, and you can see it's a packet of tea. So it shows to people today that you made tea in a teapot, there's not tea bags. And it's also showing you all kinds of other great things like Rolo, caramel chocolates, there's Lawrenson's bread, there's cars, and also how the use of language has changed because there's the use of gay detergent, which wouldn't get these days. Also in the Ephemera collection, we've got a fantastic collection of knitting patterns, probably one of the best collections within a New Zealand institution. We've got over 3,000 of those, and they date from the 1940s onwards. From the 1950s and 60s, you start to see local photographers and models being used, and obviously taken in local locations. So this cardigan with a great useful pocket in it, which can fit 2 fingers on this lady, has actually been photographed in front of the Parliament buildings in Wellington. And on the right here, we've got a pattern featuring a local Miss Otago contestant in 1960. She was one of the semi-finalists, Lynn Young, and this pattern was photographed in the grounds of Glenfalloch and with a rather splendid peacock. And the other thing that's interesting to note is that they produced patterns for what they called oversize people, who had a 40-inch or 44-inch bust. And sadly, what they used to do is, for the oversized patterns, they usually used older models. So again, we can see fashions and trends in society at that time using resources like this.
So we've got some very interesting map formats in Hocken's collections, including this 256-piece jigsaw map, and it was created in the early 1940s. The map is called A Puzzle for Europe, and the pieces of each European country that were invaded by Germany during World War II are in the shape of a swastika. The jigsaw is accompanied also by a map of Europe. We have this item as Medi Entertainment, who manufactured the jigsaw, were based locally. And we have 2 copies. The first, donated by Mr. E.W. Jeffress in 1989, was missing 2 pieces, but a second copy was found at the Regent Edinburgh book sale a few years ago, fully intact. So we picked up another copy to have a fully working function.
So in our maps collection, we've got all different kinds of maps, and includes these great farm location maps. So these were produced in the 1960s right through to the 90s, and they were often done as fundraising projects for organisations like the JCs. And here you can see one that's covering South Otago. This one was published in 1979. And what's great for people maybe doing their family history is it shows where a particular person's farm was located in the area. So something that might have been used for the local farmers is now of use for genealogical research today. As I said before, we've got millions of photographs in our collection, and they are great for showing what Dunedin used to look like. This is a photograph from 1967 showing the lower Octagon, where there was the Oban Hotel. This building still stands, and now it's a bar and cafe called Bystanders. And I also just noticed before, in the top of the photograph, you can see the wires for the trolley buses that were still working there. And on the left there, you can see a firm called Matheson and Roberts. So they were a plant and nursery. So in the lower Octagon, and our ephemera collection includes some fabulous posters for that particular firm. Here you can see a photograph of Dunedin Railway Station in the 1930s. This material was gifted to the Wairoa Museum and then transferred to the Hocken. Again, it shows changes, and obviously not to the building because that's still pretty much the same, but it shows how the foreground has changed. This is all now all planted out in a rather lovely little garden, but it's also great to see in the back, the foreground of the station, cars of that time. And then we've got this great photograph from the 1955 to 61. It was taken by photographer George Chance, showing what agricultural work was being done in Queenstown. And then this is a fabulous piece of work from the same area. So this was a painting by Nicholas Chevalier. So he came over to New Zealand in the 1860s. He was commissioned by the Otago provincial government, and he was paid £200 to travel around Otago and paint beautiful scenery to try and attract settlers over here. He also did similar kind of work for the Canterbury Provincial Council. So he went around the Mount Cook region visiting all the major lakes, and this is one of his fabulous pieces of work. And then we also have this great scene by a local artist, Ralph. He was part of the Miller family who ran Miller Studios, and this work is showing a Dunedin scene from circa 1949. And he was mostly self-taught artist, but he did have some lessons from Dunedin artists A.H. O'Keefe and Kathleen Salmond. And during the war, he was a member of the army band, and he was posted to Fiji and New Caledonia. And there are a lot of works, not necessarily in our library, but that he created showing army life at that time. But obviously back in Dunedin, he tried to show what Dunedin was like back then. And then we also have some fabulous sort of art in our posters collection. So the Railway Studio was an artist studio that was run by the railways from 1920 to 1987. And obviously they did a lot of work promoting railways and tourist destinations, but they also did work for other government departments. So here you can see a Transport Department poster. This is actually one of my favourite posters in the collection. Getting people to slow down in winter traffic with the rain. And on the right here, a poster trying to stop people from spitting on the ground because it's disgusting and dangerous and done for the Department of Health. So this is one of many great health and safety posters that we have that were done by the studio.
So in our sheet music collection, we have very, very early pieces of New Zealand sheet music. And this is the very first edition of God for New Zealand. And this is the English edition from around 1876. The first New Zealand edition came about a couple of years later. And that came about due to discontent between the authors. I think it's Thomas Bracken on the cover of this one. Don Woods was not particularly impressed that he was left off the first edition. So a second edition was printed with them both both on cover, and Māori text of God for New Zealand was available in the second edition as well. There are only 5 copies left in existence of the first English edition. It's very, very rare. And the Hocken is really lucky to have 2. And they were donated to us by the sisters at St Dominic's Priory in Dunedin. And Dunedin is possibly, the Hocken, sorry, is possibly the only collection to hold copies of this first edition that I'm aware of. I have not heard of any other institution holding these copies, but that always change. We also have a number of amazing periodicals in the Hocken, and one of my favourites is Playdate. So it was one of the film, music and popular culture magazines from the 1960s to the early 1970s. And many famous names and faces of the time were featured in the magazine. And it did often focus on local New Zealand musicians and actors and popular culture figures, especially later in the magazine's run. We've also been extremely lucky to acquire collections of local firms. So when Cadbury's closed a few years ago, the Hocken was fortunate to acquire a number of amazing things from them, including posters, chocolate boxes and packaging, and as well as the company records. Now this short reel of Cadbury advertisements from the late 1960s or early 1970s is part of the company records and would have likely been used on either television advertising or in advertisements at the movies. It was recorded in Great Britain, but used to advertise products in countries that had Cadbury's chocolate. So we're just going to play you a wee short couple of clips. So I hope you enjoy this. Come back. Oh, sorry.
This man is here to sing the praises of Cadbury's fudge.
The praises of Cadbury's fudge. The praises of Cadbury's fudge. The praises of Cadbury's fudge.
Cadbury's fudge, which is delicious fudge, just like Mum used to make. Only Cadbury's have covered it with creamy milk chocolate.
The praises of Cadbury's fudge.
Fudge! Cadbury's fudge!
Buy Cadbury's, it's good. One taste and you'll know chocolate is Cadbury.
One taste and you'll know. Sing it out! The taste for you and me. Chocolate is Cadbury. That's nice to know. Right on! Let's go! One taste and you'll know.
Cadbury taste.
Good times is Cadbury, and it's always gonna be. One taste you'll know. Great man! Chocolate is Cadbury.
So continuing on with the music theme, we have a huge collection of Māori and Pacific music at the Hocken, and it's got a strong presence in our AV collections, and recordings reflect both traditional and popular music styles. This Bill Wolfgram recording on the left, South Sea Rhythm, dates to 1956 and is considered New Zealand's first pop album, while the album on the right, Māori Songs of New Zealand, was issued on Folkways Records, and that's part of Smithsonian Folkways label in 1952, and also features traditional songs and song styles. And if you can see right up in the corner, you might be able to see the owner's name. The original owner was Professor Hargreaves, who was a geography professor, and he lived in New York for a time, and he was a major supporter of the Hocken's collections. Some of these may be very familiar to you. These are broadcast to school teachers and pupils' music books from the 1960s. Now the books included notated melodies and words so students could play or sing along with the broadcasts. But some of you may have had some of those broadcasts in your school days. The teachers' books had fuller piano or guitar scores so they could give fuller instrumentation for any performance. And some of the books, like these ones, were really beautifully illustrated, and these illustrations are by the artist Evelyn Clouston. We don't just collect music, as I said earlier, we collect all sorts of sound recordings, including children's stories and fairy tales, myths, literature, including poetry and prose writing, interviews and broadcasts. And we will also have a small collection of sports broadcasts and racing calls. And this is a favourite, this is Cinderella, published by the Children's Record Guild of New Zealand in the late 60s. And Dunedin music collections are, of course, of significant importance to us. So on the left, you've got the MC6, and Joe Brown, he was a figure he ran dances in Dunedin during the early to mid 1960s. And the MC6 were one of his dance bands who played at these dances. This 45 RPM is a recording from them at the time. In the centre, you have Luther. Now, Luther were one of the major bands from Dunedin in the early 1970s, and they were a sort of super group that formed from 3 bands that were finalists in the 1969 South Island Battle of the Bands. And their second album pictured here is probably their most popular recording. And on the end, on the right, we have a poster advertising the Chills Doldrum single. The Chills are still one of the most popular bands from the 1980s Dunedin sound scene. The band is still performing and recording today, and our collections of their material are wide and include posters and ephemera, as well as recordings and photographs. And just continue on with Dunedin music. Local 1960s band Tightened in the middle with their lovely matching suits, were one of Dunedin's top bands in the 1960s and came second in the 1968 New Zealand Battle of the Bands. They often played with the Avengers on the right when that band were touring. And the band on the left, the Catlins River Boys, were big names in South Otago, and they performed on a very early TV show. And it was a big thing. Apparently half of Oaka were in front of the television that night watching them. All the Titans and the Avengers played pop rock in the style of the groups of the day. The Catlins River Boys played country music, with some Christian songs included. And it's noted that their sound at times is similar to New Zealand's own Peter Poser. Now, the Titans didn't ever release anything, but we have a collection of their material, and it included a couple of tracks. So we have a cover of this. We have them doing Van Morrison's song Gloria, and we've just got a wee snippet of it to play for you, just so that you can see.
She makes me feel so good, though. I'm gonna just make you feel out, right? And the name is Jean. Yeah. Oh. Ah.
Okay, so going back to our archives collection, it does include a whole range of papers, and this is a collection of papers relating to Charles Mackey Beck, who served during the war, World War I, and he was the in command of the Field Ambulance and Medical Corps in Egypt, Gallipoli, and the Western Front. And his papers include these photograph albums, as well as a notes book there, and diaries. And he actually advanced to the top medical post in the New Zealand Expeditionary Force before he finished there. And we've also apparently got one of the best collections of sporting archives in the collection, and it does include this great scrapbook or album, which includes newspaper clippings as well as photographs and ephemera from a tour by a Māori rugby team in 1926 and 27 that travelled overseas. And in the top left corner there, you can see them doing the haka there.
Okay, so if you are in town in Dunedin and you would like to see more, public tours are available on Thursday mornings at 11 o'clock. You can just come in and ask at reception and you'll be taken on a tour. And we can also arrange tours for groups, so please do contact us. Both our emails are there and our phone number as well. So we'll just leave that slide up for a couple of seconds. And public tours are available all year round for individuals or groups of less than 10. And we love donations, and if you can help us with any of our collections, we are always eternally grateful. We're always keen to augment our collections of New Zealand, Antarctic and Pacific related and published and unpublished material. And any donations are very gratefully accepted, and please contact us for further information. There is a guide on giving archives and manuscripts, which is available on our website.
Thank you, Amanda and Catherine. What a fabulous tour through the Hocken, and I'm sure that you could have gone on for so much longer. I know you had me bopping in my seat to some of the music, and it was wonderful to point to the screen and take a wee trip down memory lane, and I'm sure many of our other participants felt the same. We have a couple of questions that have come in that I'd like you to see if you could answer. So one question is, in the ephemera collections, have you noticed any trends in the materials that have repeated themselves in different decades?
Yes, so I mean there is obviously still printed ephemera, so that's continued, but there are there is a trend for more things to become digital as well. So obviously lockdown was a big impact on businesses. So you may have noticed during that time that New World decided to stop creating their own mailers. So they only do them online now. So you do get things disappearing because of different technology, but obviously people still produce physical items because not everyone has access to the internet, and you know, you can include different things in physical items, but at the same time things still have to be represented. So we've got a great collection of the types of sheets that are produced in for funerals or for people that died, and so you can see that sort of coming into being in the 50s, 60s, and they're very plain, and then over time you can see with computer technology people start personalizing things a lot more, so that's something that's still there because people, well, obviously COVID has changed that as well, that not everyone's able to attend a funeral in person, but for those that are, they are still given a sheet. So that's something that's still there, but you can see over time how that has changed.
Thank you. And the other question that we've got from the same participant, Stephanie, she also asks, do you both have a favourite item in the collection, which I'm sure is a difficult question to answer. I know you mentioned one of the traffic posters, the winter driving one being one of your favourites, but is there anything else that you always love to pull out and have a look at? Or
you're right, it is one of the hardest questions. I can't pick a favourite in the music collection. I love it all. Yeah, I just can't pick a favourite, but things that do stand out are, say, things that I remember loving for a long time and maybe I haven't seen for a while, and it's all wonderful. But actually some of my favourite other things are in the Ephemera Collection. There's some amazing posters which are my favourites. And Katherine got a Toy World catalogue from the 1980s a couple of years ago, and it was one I remembered very fondly from when I was a child in the 1980s. And as soon as I saw that Toy World catalogue, I was back to being a kid. I was back to being 8 or 10 years old, and yeah, that's one of my favourite things.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the great things about having physical items. Like, things can be digitised and you can see them online, but nothing replaces being able to see the physical item and to be able to touch it, because that makes it more real. And so, like, for example, the Golden Kiwi tickets that I showed before, you can read about them in a book, but when you actually see them in person, that kind of tactile experience relays a whole lot of things that you don't always pick up on. Like, it shows you like the feel of the paper, you can see that it's been torn off a pad and all that kind of thing. So nothing replaces seeing the physical items. And again, like Amanda, it's really hard to pick something and say that's my favourite. I have different things I like to show people on tours. So for example, and we got a great set of posters from Cadbury's, and they included some fabulous Cookie Bear posters from the 1970s, which again featured the fluoro paint. So they're a great thing for me because, like, I was a member of the Cookie Bear Club in the 70s. So there's things like that, but also the great packaging that we have. We've got lots of fabulous chocolate boxes and other kinds of packaging. And even things like junk mail, and you might think, why do you keep junk mail? But if you think about it, it tells you at a particular time what kind of products we were selling, how we sold them, the technology that made them. So showing people that, because they, you know, it shows that even the most lowly kind of thing that's in our society today will have significant research value years from now. So that's one of the great things about a collection like mine. I would have to say the whole collection is my favourite.
And I think from both your answers, you have inspired many of our participants to want to come and actually have a look and have that real experience.
Oops.
Uh-oh.
those things in reality. I have another question here. Things in many and different formats. What particular things do you have to take note of?
Sorry, didn't quite catch that question. Can you just repeat it?
Sorry, what sorts of special techniques or things do you have to do to keep the collections safe? So in terms of preserving paper quality or preserving artworks, I'm sure there's a lot of special things that you need to be aware of.
Yeah, so obviously having it in our stacks is one of the major things. So our stacks are climate controlled, so they're kept at about 18 degrees and a relative humidity of 50%. So obviously most of our works are made from printed paper, so that's kind of the optimal conditions for paper. So it's not too damp where mold would grow, it's not too dry where paper would become brittle. And also we for published material and things like that, we have special packaging, so it's acid free, so again it's not going to help things deteriorate. And we try and get things measured up, especially so that the packaging fits snugly, and we'll wrap things in acid-free paper. We also, again, it depends where it's come from, because sometimes people might have kept things like in a damp basement where it's already mouldy, so sometimes that has to be treated before we would put it in our stacks next to other material. We don't have a conservator on site, but we can call on a local conservator to help us do that kind of preservation. And we have special cabinets and folders and boxes to keep material in. So we're always aiming to improve the conditions that we collect material in, you know, with new technology as well. Yeah. What about albums?
Music's a little different. A lot of music formats, for example, records are very stable. The only thing you have to be careful about, especially with the older ones, is not to drop them, because especially with 78s, they will shatter. It's just the nature of the way they're made. But LPs and 45s, if you drop them, most of the time they're okay. It's more if you put them in sunlight or any warm environment, they could sort of warp or melt. The biggest thing for things like VHS tapes and cassette tapes is keeping them in cooler temperatures. So they are in their own room, along with glass plate negatives and some film that we have. So they're in a 12-degree vault, so they're kept cooler. And that's why if people want to listen to cassette tapes or watch VHS tapes, they have to give us 24 hours knowledge, 24 hours grace to be able to get the item out and acclimatise it. Because if you put a cold tape into a room temperature machine, something's either going to go wrong with the item or the machine, and we can't have either of that happening. Yeah, so it really does come down to how you keep it and how you take care of it.
Thank you, and it's really good for us to hear from both of you to know that this precious collection is being so well looked after and carefully preserved for future generations, which is fantastic. Well, I see that we've come to 2:58, so we're coming close to the end of our session, and there are no more questions. I'd just like to remind all the participants, if you do think of any questions after we finish, please feel free to either email us back at the University of Otago where you received your invitation, or to Amanda and Katherine directly at the email addresses they showed you. But once again, we'd like to thank both Amanda and Katherine for the fascinating tour through the Hocken Collections, and hope that it has inspired some of you to maybe make a personalised visit to the collections, or even to maybe have a little bit of a look through some of the things that you have in your own house that you think might be of interest for others to see and view, and make a donation to the Hocken Collections of some of that material that you may no longer want yourselves. But thank you, all of you, for taking the time to come and spend an hour with us. Our sincere thanks to the Hocken Collections and Amanda and Katherine, and we wish that you all have a very lovely day, rest of the day, and maybe we'll see you again in the future. Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.